Vic Marorrow. Vic Marorrow was filming Twilight Zone, the movie, in a segment called Time Out, where his character is thrown into different dangerous moments in history. In one scene, he ends up in the middle of the Vietnam War, trying to save two young kids during an airstrike. The scene was shot at night and included big explosions, fire, and a real helicopter flying low over the actors. Vic was carrying two child actors, Micah Din Lay and Renee Shin-Yi Chen, across a river while fireworks and explosions were going off all around them. Things were supposed to be controlled, but something went horribly wrong. The explosions made the helicopter lose control. The pilot couldn't keep it stable, and the helicopter spun out of control and crashed right on top of them. The spinning blades from the helicopter instantly decapitated Vic and Micah, and Renee was crushed by the falling chopper. All three of them died on the spot. Brandon Lee. In 1993, Brandon Lee got the lead role in a dark and emotional action horror film called The Crow. While filming one of the final scenes, Brandon was supposed to walk into a room and get shot by one of the villains. That might sound normal for an action movie, but it went terribly wrong. The gun used in the scene was a prop revolver. In movies, prop guns often fire blanks. They make noise and flash like real bullets, but don't actually shoot anything dangerous. But in this case, a real piece of a dummy bullet had gotten stuck in the barrel of the gun earlier during a test. Nobody checked properly before loading it with blanks.
27-year-old Brandon Lee was killed during a movie set accident today.
When the blank was fired, it launched the stuck bullet piece straight into Brandon's abdomen, just like a real bullet. At first, people on set thought it was part of the scene, but when Brandon didn't get up and was clearly in pain, everyone panicked. He was rushed to the hospital, and after hours of surgery, he tragically died. The movie was almost finished, so the crew decided to complete it using a body double, special effects, and early CGI, which is actually kinda crazy. But it's nowhere near as crazy as the accidents later on in the video, like Sonia Davis. Sonia Davis was a professional stuntwoman working on a horror comedy film called Vampire in Brooklyn, starring Eddie Murphy and Angela Bassett. The movie was a mix of scary and funny, but the events that happened on set were not funny. Sonia was Angela Bassett's stunt double, which means she was the one doing the dangerous action scenes that were too risky for the main actor. And sadly, she ended up paying the ultimate price. In one scene, Sonia had to fall backward off a rooftop from 42 feet high, which is about 4 stories. The plan was for her to land safely on a huge airbag placed on the ground, which is a common tool used in stunt work. But unfortunately, it didn't go as planned. Instead of landing in the center of the airbag, she bounced off the edge, hit the side of the building, and then fell to the ground. She was seriously hurt and rushed to the hospital, but her injuries were so severe that she fell into a coma and died 13 days later. Her family, including her mother, was on set and actually saw the accident happen, which made it even more devastating. Ricardo Cornelius. Ricardo Cornelius wasn't an actor or a stuntman. He was part of the behind-the-scenes crew on Resident Evil, the final chapter. But sadly, the film is also remembered for something truly heartbreaking: the death of Ricardo, a 34-year-old crew member who was just doing his job. The accident happened in South Africa, where they were filming some of the movie's big scenes. One of the props being used was a massive military vehicle, a real-life Humvee. During filming, the Humvee was set up on a rotating platform, which is used to make vehicles move a certain way for the camera, but something went wrong. The Humvee suddenly slipped off the platform and crashed into Ricardo, pinning him against a wall. People on set rushed to help him and got him to the hospital as fast as they could, but the injuries were just too severe, and Ricardo didn't make it. What's even more tragic is that this wasn't the only serious accident on that movie. Just weeks earlier, a stuntman named Olivia Jackson had been badly hurt during a motorcycle stunt. She crashed so badly that her arm had to be amputated, but that's nowhere near as bad as the next one. Dominique Dunn. Dominique Dunn was just 22 years old when she starred in Poltergeist. She played Dana, the teenage daughter in the haunted house. But just a few months after the movie came out, something truly awful happened in real life that no one saw coming. Dominique had been in a relation named John Sweeney, but things weren't going well. He was jealous and controlling, and Dominique had already broken up with him. But on October 30, 1982, he showed up at her house to talk. The conversation turned into an argument, ended in horrible violence. Sweeney strangled Dominique right outside her home, and when the police arrived, they found her unconscious. She had been choked so slipped into a coma. Doctors tried to save her, but her injuries were too serious. 5 days later, on November 4, 1982, Dominique passed away. Heather O'Rourke. Heather O'Rourke was the little girl who starred in all 3 Poltergeist movies. Even if you've never seen the films, you've probably heard her creepy but iconic line, "They're here." But sadly, Heather's real life ended in a way that no one expected. She died at just 12 years old, right before Poltergeist III was finished. What happened was actually a medical tragedy. For a long time, doctors believed she had Crohn's disease, a condition that affects your stomach and intestines, but they were wrong. She actually had something much more dangerous, a blockage in her intestine that nobody caught in time. One day, Heather started feeling really sick. She was rushed to the hospital and had to get emergency surgery. But during the operation, her body went into septic shock, which is a serious condition where your body reacts badly to an infection. Then Then she had cardiac arrest, and despite all the doctor's efforts, she passed away on February 1, 1988. Will Samson. Will Samson played Taylor, the kind Native American shaman in Poltergeist 2, The Other Side. His character tried to help the Freeling family get rid of the evil spirits that were haunting them. When he joined the movie, Will felt like something was wrong on set. People had already been talking about weird stuff happening during the making of Poltergeist, so Will decided to perform a blessing ceremony to clear out any bad energy or spirits that might be hanging around. A lot of people respected him for that and believed it helped calm things down. But sadly, not long after filming ended, Will's health took a serious turn. He had been dealing with some serious medical issues and needed a heart-lung transplant, which is one of the most complicated surgeries out there. On June 3, 1987, just a year after Poltergeist 2 came out, Will died because his body rejected the transplant. He was only 53 years old. His death really hit fans hard. Even though it was from natural causes, it happened close to the other tragedies that had already happened with Poltergeist actors like Dominique Dunn and Heather O'Rourke. So, people started connecting the dots and talking even more about the so-called Poltergeist curse. Julian Beck. Julian Beck played one of the creepiest horror villains ever, Reverend Kane in Poltergeist II. But what made his role even scarier is that Beck was actually really sick while filming the movie. At the time, he was battling stomach cancer, and it was serious. In fact, the way he looked in the movie Zooper, thin, pale, and eerie, wasn't just makeup. That was how he really looked due to the illness. Despite feeling unwell, he still gave a powerful and unforgettable performance. Sadly, before the movie even came out, Julian Beck passed away. He died on September 14, 1985 at age 60 from complications caused by his cancer. His death wasn't a total shock because everyone knew he had been sick, but it still hit hard, especially since it happened so close to the film's release. Lou Perryman. Lou Perryman didn't have a big role in Poltergeist, played a construction worker named Pugsley, but his real-life story is one of the most disturbing things tied to the so-called Poltergeist curse. Decades after the movie came out, in 2009, Lou was living a quiet life in Texas. He was 67 years old and no longer in the spotlight. But out of nowhere, something absolutely horrifying happened. A man who had just been released from prison went on a crime spree and, sadly, Lou's house was one of the random places he picked. The man broke in and murdered Lou with an axe. There was no connection, no motive, just pure, senseless violence. The killer later confessed and said he chose the house randomly. It was completely unexpected and incredibly tragic. What's eerie is that even though Lou had a small role in Poltergeist, his brutal murder got added to the list of weird and tragic events tied to the film. Jack McGowan. Jack McGowan played Burke Dennings in The Exorcist, the sarcastic film director who ends up dying mysteriously after messing with the possessed girl, Regan. Just after he finished filming his scenes, Jack caught a really bad case of the flu. It seemed like something he could recover from, but it quickly got worse. Back then, flu complications could be deadly, especially if your body was already weak. In January 1973, not long before the movie was released, Jack died from flu complications at just 54 years old. What made this so eerie is that in the movie, his character dies under mysterious circumstances. She falls down some steps and breaks his neck, possibly because of the demon's influence. And then Jack himself passed away shortly after filming that exact scene. People started wondering, was that just a weird coincidence or something more? Sidney Bamford. Sidney Bamford wasn't an actor in The Omen, but he still played an important role in making one of the movie's most unforgettable scenes happen. He worked as an animal handler during the intense zoo sequence. Remember the one where a bunch of baboons go wild and attack a car? But just a day after filming that scene, something terrible happened. Sidney was working with animals at a nearby safari park, and this time, it wasn't baboons he was dealing with. It was tigers. Somehow, a gate was left unlocked, and a tiger managed to get to Sidney. The animal mauled and killed him in a horrific accident. It was sudden, violent, and deeply shocking to everyone who worked with him. The baboon scene had already been intense and dangerous, and then to have an animal handler die the next day made people feel like something truly cursed was going on. And to be honest, The Omen already had people on edge. During production, lightning struck a plane carrying crew members, and another plane crash killed others connected to the film. Then, Sidney's death happened, and it pushed the fear to another level. Liz Moore. Liz Moore was a special effects artist who worked behind the scenes on The Omen. One of the most famous scenes she helped create was the shocking decapitation scene, where a character gets his head sliced off in brutal slow motion. At the time, people were stunned by how realistic it looked, but after the movie finished filming, something terrifying happened in real life that seemed straight out of a horror movie. Liz and her partner, John Richardson, who was the head special effects guy on The Omen, were driving in the Netherlands. Out of nowhere, they were in a serious car accident. Liz was sitting in the passenger seat when a wheel from their car smashed through the windshield and decapitated her. Just like the scene they had worked on in the movie, John survived the crash but was obviously traumatized. The eerie part? People say there was a road sign near the crash that read, Omen 66.6 kilometers. Yes, Omen, a real place, and 666 is the number often connected to the devil. That creepy coincidence made everyone start talking again about the Omen curse. Krzysztof Komeda was the man behind the music in Rosemary's Baby. Komeda was a Polish composer cancer, and after the movie was released in 1968, he went to a party in Los Angeles. While he was there, something bizarre and tragic happened. One of his friends, apparently drunk playfully, pushed him off a small rocky ledge. It wasn't meant to hurt him, but the fall was bad. Komeda hit his head hard, and the injury was way more serious than anyone thought. He ended up falling into a coma and never woke up. A few months later, in April 1969, he died at just 37 years old. What makes this story even more chilling is that in Rosemary's Baby, a character also falls into a coma and later dies. So fans couldn't help but see a weird connection between the movie's plot and Komeda's real-life death. Neil Fredericks. Neil Fredericks wasn't a famous actor or director, but he was the cinematographer behind one of the most talked-about horror movies ever, The Blair Witch Project. Sadly, just a few years later, while working on another horror movie called Crossbones, Neil's life was cut short in the most tragic way. The movie was being filmed in the Florida Keys, and Neil was shooting aerial footage from a small Cessna plane, those tiny airplanes you see in documentaries. He was strapped into the plane with his camera gear, trying to get some cool shots from above the water. But then, things went terribly wrong. The plane started having problems in the air and had to make an emergency landing, but instead of landing on a runway, it crash-landed into a deep bay. The pilot, director, and other crew members were able to get out and swim to safety. But Neil, he was trapped inside. His safety harness wouldn't release, and he drowned before anyone could help him. He was only 35 years old. The movie was eventually finished and released in 2005, and it was dedicated to Neil's memory. J.C. Curran. J.C. Curran was a professional stuntman, and like many stunt performers, his job was to do the dangerous stuff so the actors didn't have to. He worked on a B-horror movie called Bikini Island, which was about models on a photo shoot getting attacked, one by one, classic slasher vibes. But sadly, what happened on the very first day of filming was more horrifying than anything in the movie. Jay was set to perform a 55-foot high fall off a cliff. That's like falling from the roof of a 5-story building. The plan was simple. He'd jump and land safely on a big airbag below, which is a standard safety setup for high falls. But something went horribly wrong. During the stunt, he either miscalculated the jump or something shifted, and he missed the airbag completely. Instead of a cushioned landing, Jay fell straight onto the rocky ground. The injuries were so bad that he died instantly. Everyone on set was in total shock. The production was immediately paused, and people started asking serious questions about how the stunt had been prepared. Jack Tyrie. Jack Tyrie was another veteran stuntman, and he was working on a movie called The Sword and the Sorcerer. It was one of those 1980s fantasy adventure films with swords, castles, and a little horror mixed in. Jack's job was to perform a crazy high fall from a huge tower, and it was supposed to be one of the biggest stunts of its kind at the time. The fall was 78 feet high, which is insane. That's about the height of an 8-story building. He was wearing a full costume, which made the jump even more difficult because the extra fabric and gear could affect how he landed. But Jack was known for taking on big, bold stunts, and everyone expected it to go smoothly. Unfortunately, it didn't. When he jumped, he was just slightly off. That tiny miscalculation meant he missed the center of the airbag and hit the ground instead. He died instantly from the impact. Rondo Hatton. Rondo played the Creeper, a scary, silent killer in a few Universal horror films. He didn't need much makeup. His unique appearance gave him a naturally terrifying look that worked perfectly for the genre. One of his most well-known roles was in The Brute Man, which was being filmed in 1945. But while he was working on the movie, Rondo's health was getting worse. Acromegaly can cause serious health problems, especially with the heart. After The Brute Man finished filming, Rondo suffered a heart attack and died in early 1946. He was only 51 years old. Even though he finished filming before he died, the movie hadn't been released yet. His death made the whole thing feel kind of eerie. Universal Studios actually got a little weird about it. They distanced themselves from the movie, worried that it would seem too sad or disturbing to promote. Eventually, they sold the film to another studio, and it came out later that year. If you thought this was shocking, wait till you see the most painful deaths in Stranger Things. Click right here to watch it now before it disappears.